Brian, I want to switch gears and talk about tax strategies for business owners. What are some of the things that they should be thinking about during this time of year?
It may depend on the year end of the various business, but if year end is December, whether you're incorporated or not, if you plan to buy anything, definitely do it now, before the end of the year, because then you would get the tax deduction for it this year versus next year kind of thing. There's rules that in their last budget they expanded how quickly you can write off equipment used in your business. So if you want to purchase something, better to purchase it now than later kind of thing and get a big write-off under revised tax rules that came in this year, I think. So again, if you're going to spend some money, do it before the end of the year is what I would say first.
Okay. With COVID, a lot more people were working from home. Can you just remind us what kind of tax relief they can take advantage of?
Okay. Last year obviously was the first personal tax year. You did your 2020 personal tax return, and many people were able to deduct at least maybe $400 of home office expenses. That's the big win, if you want to call it that, from a COVID for an individual employee that's forced to work at home, and many of us are still working at home now. So we were able to take a bit of a deduction for home office expenses. I don't know if CRA will expand that as we go into personal tax season over the next couple of months, but definitely as people have incurred expenses, one for the full year versus maybe 9 months last year, is tracking whether you can write off a percentage of your rent, a percentage of your utilities. Did you have to buy a computer to do your job at home? What did your employer reimburse? Worse not, kind of thing. So hopefully we'll get some more leadership from that. We have a budget coming in March if they're going to change the rules on that kind of thing. But definitely you want to make sure when you do your personal tax return in a few months that you do take advantage of what you can deduct from working at home due to COVID.
Okay. The Liberals, they just released their fiscal update. Is there anything that stood out for you that that business owners or just Canadians need to be aware of?
Okay. The biggest thing was what wasn't there. I think the whole tax community was afraid that the capital gains inclusion rate would be increased. Right now, we pay 50% of a capital gain is subject to tax.
Right.
And in past years, in the 90s, they've increased that to 66 2/3 and up to 75%. So the tax people are worried. We got to pay for all these COVID. COVID's been very, very expensive to the government. And part of the fiscal update was Liberals are going to spend more and more money on COVID kind of thing. So the good news is capital gains are still at 50%, but we do have a federal budget coming in March, which could be more meat into it in terms of tax changes coming up. So I'd be aware the March budget.
Okay. So Brian, we talked about year end, a checklist that people need to think about. Of course, with tax planning, it never ends. You should always be thinking about it.
Yes.
What should people look at going into the new year and maybe for the first couple of months?
I think that's a great question. I think I always use the word life cycle tax planning. When you're a student, you've got your tuition credits. You may get married, and there's credits there for a spouse in a lower tax bracket. Children come along, so we have childcare. It's big things that happen in your life. How does that impact your tax position kind of thing? So you're always thinking along the lines, and what can you do with you and your family to minimize the overall tax burden? I always say, don't be a selfish tax planner, bring your family into it. And there's many rules in the Income Tax Act that are incentives to do certain things. These are tried, tested, and true tax planning things that are in the Act. Just making sure you're taking advantage of them as you go through different stages of life.
So what about RSPs? Because
RSP?
that's a big one that a lot of people pay attention to for the first couple of months.
A very big one, and that's one deadline. It's not in 2 weeks, not at the end of December. We have until March 1st, 2022 to make your 2021 contribution. So I believe in RRSP, so you don't have to hustle out the next 2 weeks to make your 2021 contribution. You have until March 1st to make it as well. So that often is one of Canada's best tax shelters. If you're an employee, there's very, very little you can write off. So make the RSP contribution to save you and your family some taxes. No question.
Yeah. And don't wait until the end of March, right? Because you want to take advantage of that power of compounding.
Exactly. If you have the money now, do it now. Do it in the next 2 weeks kind of thing. Get the money in the RSP and start growing tax deferred or compounding tax deferred as you want. And into January, February, you can start making your 2022 contribution. No need to wait until the end of the year to make the contribution for the coming year.
Brian, thanks so much for your insights today and your tips.
Great.
We appreciate
Anytime.
you coming on. Brian Quinlan, partner with Campbell Lawless Chartered Professional Accountants.